So I am continuing to read and be inspired by this lovely little gem of a book by the Lama Yeshe archives, Wisdom Archives, of a talk that Lama Yeshe gave in Australia in his first trip to Australia back in 1975, called "The Peaceful Stillness of the Silent Mind." And what's coming up for me, or what I'm starting to see in these very simple but profound teachings, is that whether you're just entering the Buddha Dharma, like you just met it like yesterday, or you've been practicing it for a decade, or you've been practicing it for decades, or you're a layperson, or you're a monastic, or you're a scholar, or you're an author, or you're a meditator in a cave somewhere. The fundamental teaching is, what's the state of your mind? And what's going on in here? And what gets in the way of cultivating the peaceful stillness of the silent mind, to be able to connect with this clarity and awareness, this deep understanding of the nature of reality, free from any type of stories and misconceptions, and, as Lama Yeshe says, hallucinations and fantasies and forms of extremism. What is the state of my mind? So it's like from the beginning of the path all the way up, that's the fundamental question. And that Lama says that the Buddha said over and over again that the sole purpose of his teachings was to give us the tools to realizing the nature of our minds, and to be able to generate the wisdom to understand the entire scope and potential of them. I mean, that's what the Buddha said. This is what I'm giving you. And from our side, Lama says, and we've heard this, we've heard it from Venerable, we've heard it from our teachers, we read it in the books all the time, but it's going in much more deeply for me. It says, don't take me on my word. Take my teachings, put them into your lives, work with your mind, see if that indeed can be transformed, as it transformed my own mind, into minds of more love, compassion, bodhicitta, wisdom, ethical conduct. And from that transformation, how do we experience and express that kind of mind in our lives? And that Lama Yeshe says, we have to understand the teachings. We have great minds in this culture, but sometimes it goes in and it just goes in about this far. He says we've got to get it into our hearts in a real, direct, personal, and correct way, if we're really going to be able to cultivate this silent mind. And that Lama says if we don't understand the teachings in a personal way, it will always just stay to be a dream, a fantasy, an inner dialogue, a Hollywood script. And if someone questions our beliefs on why we're doing what we're doing, we're not going, because we don't understand, our whole spiritual life is going to collapse like a deck of cards, because we're not going to be able to answer them. Why are you practicing Buddhism? I've got one. What do you people do up there? And if you really, really don't understand what you're doing here and practicing this path, you won't be able to respond in a heartfelt way that not only brings clarity to your own mind, but really informs people of this incredible spiritual experience that the Dharma may be for some people. So Lama says it's so important to really bring it down into our hearts, and it takes time. It's a very gradual path, and to really relax into it and enjoy ourselves. So what he says is just so great. The advice is to put our lives all together, both the material everyday necessities on how to keep a roof over our heads, how to work for a living, our family, our friends, and put that together with our spiritual life. He says, go ahead and enjoy your material life as much as you like. And at the same time, understand the nature of the mind that is experiencing that enjoyment and how the two relate. So we're going back to that fundamental Lam Rim teaching, Lam Rim meditation that we have, is the mind is the source of happiness and pain. In other words, how much does the state of our mind influence our experience? And Lama says, if we're paying attention to what is going on the inside, he says that's spiritual practice. If you're spending all of your time focused on the outside worldview and have not a clue what's going on the inside, he says that's full materialism. And that's how he kind of comes around to finally making the distinction of what the definition of both of those things are. And he says if we're totally focused on the outside, our minds get very narrow and closed. And it's not necessarily about owning things. It's not about how many friends you have or how much family or how many gadgets you have. He says it's all around what we bring as far as our attitude to having those possessions or those worldly everyday experiences. So he uses an example. I'll use his flower example first, and then you can pretty much insert any object, any experience, any person in this little example. He says, say I dedicate my life to one object. This flower is so beautiful. As long as it's alive, my life is worth living. If this flower dies, I want to die too. That's a totally materialistic world where you've got yourself so focused outside that what happens out there outside affects you so deeply. You're attached to the outcome. You're attached to sense pleasures. You see your happiness coming from outside. He says, if I believe this, I'm stupid, aren't I? He says the flower is just an example, but once again, I could put in there my attachment to beauty, my ideas, my reputation. I could put my family in there. Anything from its outside that we think is really bringing the happiness, and if we lose it, separate it, if they die, if it gets broken, we're just bereft. And I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of bereft moments in my life because I really believe that my happiness came from outside myself. On the other hand, Lama says the more realistic approach would be, yes, the flower is beautiful, but it won't last. Today it's alive, tomorrow it's going to be wilted dead. However, my satisfaction doesn't come from that flower. And I wasn't born human just to enjoy flowers. Okay, so it's this realistic using the mind saying, I can enjoy it, but I have to realize its limitations. And that if I want to be happy, I can't depend on flowers and people and goods and reputation and sense objects and reputation and stuff. I can enjoy them, but I have to understand what the limitations are. Then he goes on to say, the other challenge we have besides this, this expectation is that he says we're not sure what we want. He says that's also an extreme. He says a thought pops into our heads and we jump at the idea and act on it. Another idea comes into our heads, we jump on it and we act on it. Another idea comes into our heads, we jump on it and we act on it all day long. He says this is a form of mental illness. And some of these ideas come and go, but some of them we really grasp onto. Some of the ideas are so fixed that we tie ourselves up in knots, grasping onto them, saying, and this is where the extremism comes, this is great, I hate it. I'm right, you're wrong. We should do it this way, not that way. My life should look like this, not like that. This extremism of putting these huge expectations on how we think the world should be, and that our ideas are part of our identity. The more we tie ourselves up with fixed ideas, and that can be about anything, the more we cause trouble for ourselves and others. Okay, then he kind of smooths this out with a beautiful explanation. Everybody's mind, everybody's basic nature is constantly changing. You have to accept that and bring some flexibility to your ideas of the way things should be. Fixed ideas make life difficult. Is that not like a universal truth or what? Why do we solidify ideas? I want my life to be exactly like this because I like. That's the whole reason, because we like things that way. None of us wants to die, but can we fix it so that we won't? We would live forever enjoying life on earth. Can we fix it so that we will? No, it's impossible. Your basic nature, your mind, your body, the world is always changing. Wanting things to go exactly a certain way is only making trouble for yourself. So once again, we're back to, if we want the stillness of the silent mind, we've got to let go of this inflexible grasping at our ideas as being a certain way and try to negotiate and strategize our lives in order to see if we can make those things happen. It's just not going to happen. It's impossible. So at the very end, so he says we don't have to squeeze ourselves into an idea of who we think we should be or how the world should be. Flexibility of mind is crucial for living in an impermanent world, changing moment by moment. So I'll end with one little piece here. By constantly observing your own everyday life, how your mind interprets your family and friends, how your mind interprets what you feel, by always checking, you will realize that what makes life complicated is your own misconceptions. You are understanding that your problem comes from you. Now you are starting to learn. So there's this beautiful truth of the Dharma is that once we realize that how we feel and what we experience, the ups and downs of our life are so completely self-created. And once we get that, awareness is a huge part of practicing the Dharma. If we get the awareness of how we misunderstand things and how we project, we are halfway there as far as I'm concerned. The awareness is a huge piece to practicing. And we're starting to gain wisdom just by recognizing that. So there's no progress without understanding. The more you understand, the more progress you make, even if it means that I'm the cause of all of my problems. He says, if you have no understanding, even if you learn countless intellectual ideas, they're just ideas and you're wasting your life. So he really wants to get us on board on getting everything into the heart, getting everything into our own personal experience and really making the Dharma real for us. And to be saying, all right, now I'm getting some wisdom here.